Hi. You know, there's a lot of great new materials on the fly tying market today. Fritz, crony skin, buzzer wrap, beads of all sorts of colors. With all of that, sometimes the old standbys get lost. Fur and feathers. One of those standbys that I like to rely on from time to time is deer hair. You know, it can be exacting at times, but if you know a couple of simple tricks, it's quite easy to use. Today we're going to look at stacking and spinning deer hair. Welcome to my fly bench. You know, one tool you are going to need to handle deer hair is a deer hair stacker. This particular model is a metal stacking tube with an inner brass sleeve. But you don't have to purchase a deer hair stacker in order to stack deer hair. When I first started fly tying, my first deer hair stacker was an empty bullet shell casing, readily available and cheap. So let's take a look at how to use this tool to improve your deer hair handling skills. Using a deer hair stacker is really a very simple process. To put it to use properly, you want to take your deer hide here and pinch a cluster of hair that you're going to want for your fly. And you will notice when you cut it off that the deer hair tips are all different lengths. In order to amend that, you take the stacker and you put the tips in first into the stacker. Simply then tap that, not too hard, lightly on a surface, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen times. And when you've done that, you pull it out, lo and behold, your deer hair are all equal lengths. And this will make it much easier to handle the deer hair when you're tying your particular flies if all the tips are aligned. A useful skill to have for stacking deer hair on a hook is the loose loop method. It's also useful for other materials as well, as it prevents the materials from the thread from exerting rotational pressure around the hook shank. So here I've attached my string as if it were thread, and when I come in with my material, I will bring it onto the hook just over the thread point and then pinch the material and the hook shank in my 2 fingers, my finger and thumb. Then using my right hand to control the bobbin and the thread, I'll bring the thread up and pinch it under my thumb. That way I can slacken the tension on the bobbin and the thread, and this is where the loose loop comes in. I lay a loop down on the other side with a bobbin and pinch it with my forefinger. Now we have this loose loop here, which we can now slowly exert pressure on, and what that does is exerts the pressure evenly down onto the hook, all sides of the material at the same time. We do that, we secure our material in place, and we have avoided spinning it or rotating it around the hook. I usually do 2 of those, so I'll bring that thread up again, pinch it with my thumb, leave that loose loop there, pinch it with my forefinger, and then slowly exert pressure down, catching the material on that second loose loop. After which I've done that, I can take my left hand away and continue to tighten down on the material. One of the tips I can give you about stacking and layering deer hair is to use a heavier gauge of thread. Here I'm using 3/0 unithread. In this particular brand, the higher the number of aughts, the finer the gauge. So for chironomids and other small flies, I'm often using 6/0 or 8/0. But I find with deer hair, a heavier cord is better suited to the task. Now, one of the attributes of deer hair is it's slippery, and so is your metal hook shank. If you just try to tie it on there, it's going to twist and spin on you. So what you want to do is lay down a layer of tying thread. Now, as thread is slightly waxed, it provides a great deal more friction than the bare hook shank. So once I've got that thread laid down where I want to stack my hair, I make sure the layer is well suited to the area and covers the area I want to tie the deer hair on. Then I pick up my previously stacked deer hair that came out of the stacker with the tips all even, and I measure it against the hook how long do I want this wing? Do I want it to come to the bend of the hook? Do I want it to go further back, somewhere in between? You decide the length that you want, and experience will tell you where to put that. So now that I've got the length measured, I'll switch hands to my left hand, pinching the deer hair and the hook in my left hand and fingers. That leaves my right hand free for handling the bobbin. Now, this is where the loose loop method comes in. What I do is we bring the thread up between our thumb and the hair in the hook shank and pinch it, leaving it slack up here. That's the loose loop, and we're going to draw that down slowly onto the deer hair. And this prevents us from exerting rotational pressure on that thread and on the hair. That rotational pressure, again, is going to want to twist the hair off to the side. What I do is now I lay another second loose loop in there. Again, there's slack on that thread, and I draw it down slowly. At this point, I can tighten up on that, and you'll see the ends of the hair flare here quite a bit. Now I can lay some tight loops down on that, work my way back, and now it's time to gather up all these tag ends and give them a haircut. So we'll pull those all up as much as possible. We'll go hunting for the escapees down here and give them a cut, and this tag end down here, without being careful not to cut my thread and ruin the whole process. Now that we've got the tag ends cut off, we can pinch down again just to make sure it's not going to go anywhere, and lay some more tight wraps. This is where that heavier gauge of thread really comes in handy at securing the deer hair onto your hook. And there you have a layered or stacked patch of deer hair, which will help form a perfect wing on your fly. The other skill we talked about with deer hair is spinning it, and that requires a different approach. With spinning deer hair, we do not stack it. We dispense with that step, because in the end we're going to be clipping all our deer hair to a specific shape. What we do here is we attach our tying thread to the hook, but we leave that part of the hook that we want to spin the deer hair on bare. Having thread on there will prevent the deer hair from flaring out and spinning around the hook. We want it slippery in this case, so we need a completely opposite approach to when we layer it. So I've attached my thread here. Now I'm going to take my cluster of deer hair about in the middle and pinch it on the hook, and then I'll give it one rotation of the thread like so, and then let go and pull tight and spin it. And that way we get it flared out all around. Don't worry if a few hairs fall away. Now what we do is we'll pull all that hair back, because we want to build up a body of spun deer hair. And once we get it pulled back, we'll throw another loop in there to lock it in place. In comes the next cluster, and we keep repeating this method until we have all the hair on there we want. What I'll show you is one more important step. Here again, holding it in front on the bare hook, giving it one wrap, and then flaring it around with a wrap of the hook. Now pushing it back, and we want to pack that tightly. The more tightly it's packed, the better formed head or body it's going to make on your fly. We pull that back, give it one wrap in front of the hair, and we come in with our next cluster. So I'm just going to repeat the next few clusters without anecdote. At this point I've reached the head of the fly, and I'm going to tie a head on there, a nice conical head. And I'll bring in my whip finish tool and whip finish that off. And we can remove our thread here. Now again, I'm going to now show you what spun deer hair can do. You can clip it to any shape you want. Often on muddler minnows it's clipped to a bullet-shaped head, neat head. On other patterns, it's clipped to sort of a football shape, tapered at both ends with wide in the middle. I'm just going to clip this to a basic head without anecdote again. Now you'll notice I've got a rotational vise here, which greatly simplifies the shaving and shaping of the deer hair on your flies, but it's not necessary. After you've tied off the thread, you can simply remove it from the vise and handle it by hand, and that will also do just as well. I did that for many years. Now if you look at this deer hair, you will note how tightly it's packed, and that's an important feature. The more tightly you pack it, the better shape that you're going to achieve on your final product. So that's spinning deer hair as opposed to stacking it, and a very useful couple of skills to have in order to use deer hair properly and improve the appearance and fishability of your flies. Good luck out there.